They all have instructions for figuring out how thick your pasture is. We have been doing some measurements. We know that this inventory piece is important on farms. What are some ways that you guys could measure grass on your farm to keep on top of the inventory? I brought a few examples. Anyone know what these are?
Forage sticks.
Yes, I think that's what you said, but you said it very quietly. Yeah, these are pasture sticks, sword sticks, grazing sticks. They have a few different names. Basically, they're a souped up ruler specifically designed to measure how much pasture you've got. So all three of these are different. They came from different sources, but the thing they have in common, they all have some sort of ruler on one side, okay? They all have instructions for figuring out how thick your pasture is. So when I'm talking about thickness, if you look down at your boots, how much bare ground can you see? And depending on where you are in a given pasture, you might see more bare earth, you might see less, depending on what pasture you're in, right? That's gonna change. So each of these has a different way of determining that. One of them is looking at percent ground cover, so actually estimating, okay, what percentage is plants and what percentage do I see that's bare dirt. One of these gives a list of possible different types of field management, which I'm not sure I love, but that was the way that they went. And the third one, where is it? Oh yeah, the third one actually has a cool little grid on the side with some dots on it. So this one you actually slide along ground level and then look straight down and count the number of dots. So the more dots you can see, the thinner the stand is.
So we're following you now.
All right. So this one has a grid with little dots in it.
Oh, so if it's start looking at it,
yeah.
see it.
So if you slide it under here, now because this has been grazed short, it looks a little more open, but you're looking straight down and then you go, okay, 1, 2,
I think
3 dots.
bringing those stakes out to that pasture where there's almost a month's regrowth.
Yeah, we can
maybe demonstrate a little better there.
we can play with it out there. Do you trust the calibration? Right, so out of these 3 sticks, this one was printed by an international company that sells fencing equipment, which means that they could have got their calibration numbers technically from anywhere in the world, although given that this one is in pounds per acre, that tells me they probably printed it specifically for the North American market because Americans use imperial and so do Canadian farmers. And they've also got some warm season grasses that we see in the southern US as options on here. So I suspect it was calibrated in North America, but where? North America is a big place. This next one was from West Virginia, which a little bit further south than us, a little bit different forage species. The other thing I don't love about this is they don't give a range. You pick low, average, or high density, and then you measure your height. So like for 8 inches of growth in an average thickness of pasture, you have 2,620 pounds of dry matter per acre. This stick is far too confident for my liking because it's not factoring in how variable a multi-species pasture can be. So this is probably my least favorite in my collection just because it's too sure of itself. It doesn't give me a range. This last stick comes from the Great Lakes Grazing Network, which was active in the early 2000s. So this one already, I'm going, okay, we're in the Great Lakes Basin, Great Lakes Grazing Network. Hopefully someone did their homework. That should be more applicable to us than somewhere in North America or West Virginia. Like the Somewhere in North America stick, this one also offers a range. So I like that because as you use it regularly on your farm, you can realize, okay, does my pasture tend to be on the high side of the calibration or the low side of the calibration? So it's got that enough information to get you going, but also enough wiggle room to account for the fact that pastures are very variable. Ideally, If you're talking to extension folks like myself, they tell you about 30 to get a good average. So it's a lot of set it down, measure the height. For this one, you gotta lay it flat as well, check your density, make a note, move on, take an average. Okay, so it's a lot of pencil and papery math. In terms of where you get one, like I said, that's the other drawback of these, is they tend to be available as ag swag, whether it's at a farm show or a conference, or a group or company will decide to print them. They'll either give them away or sell them close to cost. And when they're gone, they're gone. So I did check online a few weeks ago to see, can you buy one of these? Couldn't find one. So if you have one stashed in a closet somewhere, that's awesome. If you don't have one,
Pass away.
yeah, you're out of luck until they become fashionable again, unfortunately. Yes and no. So one thing that comes up frequently when we start talking about how grazing managers make decisions at a broader level, not specifically just on inventory management, but very often, like surveying farmers, surveying ranchers, when the results come back in, the underlying, how do you know when to do something? How do you know what to do for management? The answer is always, well, I know from my experience. So if you have that experience, fantastic. Yeah, is this gonna help you train your eye?
That's what
Not so much.
you won't get a guy over 60 using that thing.
And you're not my target audience, Mark. You have trained your eye. You've been through the school of hard knocks. You set yourself up for that. So all of these tools, because I've got 2 more to show you, all of these tools are about training your eye and training your eye faster than going, I think there's 2 days worth of feed out here. I'm gonna set my fence here and then find out if I'm right or wrong. You still have to go through that process, but by having a tool to kind of narrow that down, it can help train the eye faster. So instead of taking 10 years to get really good at knowing your fields and setting those breaks and having the right allocation, it might only take 5 or 3. It's the idea of training that eye faster. So I know you can do this by eye.
I'm going to say you're agreeing with me.
I am. I know you can. I know you can do this by eye, Mark. This is an option for people who are going, I wish I was better at doing it by eye. This is a way to help train that, and so are these next couple ones. All right. Ooh, thank goodness that's laminated. Okay. Does anyone know what this is?
Not something I'm gonna carry around a field.
Fair. This one's called a falling plate meter, okay? There's 2 types of plate meters. I'll show you the other one in a second. But basically, the falling plate meter is combining height and stand thickness into one number, okay? So where the grazing sticks, we had to measure the height and we had to figure out the thickness, and from there, do the math. This is turning it into one number. So it's saving a step, basically. So the idea with this, I'm on a slope, that's not a good place to demonstrate this. Normal meter stick, you can pick one up at the hardware store, and then you gently lower the plate down, and it compresses the grass underneath. So it's creating a bit, it's less subjective than going, oh, how thick is my stand? Because you've got a constant weight from that plate, and you just set it down. So just like the grazing sticks, in a perfect world, it would be a minimum of 30 measurements per paddock. You're absolutely right, it's awkward to carry around. And there's the same problem as the sticks. There's a little bit of crouching to figure out, oh, I have my stick upside down. How many centimeters off the ground is that at the top there? So you wanna set it down level. And then from there, you would need a calibration to multiply out how many pounds of dry matter per acre or kilograms per hectare would be corresponding to that compressed sward height, sward being a grassland word for a stand, okay? It's an easy DIY project. I've made a couple already. I used baler twine on mine. This was one that was in my office that was handy when I was packing, so I grabbed this one. There are instructions out of West Virginia that seem to be the most popular design. So this one's an 18-inch by 18-inch plate in a 1/4-inch acrylic. I made one in 2019 that was 12 by 12 inches just to see if I could get the price point under 50 bucks. At that time I could, and about half of my cost was the 1.5-inch Forstner bit to drill that hole in the center. So it can be a reasonably inexpensive DIY project. The major drawback is it's awkward to carry. Are you gonna use it if it's awkward to carry? You're still writing down your measurements as you go so you can average them for your paddock. The other potential drawback on these is that extension services are not likely to give you a calibration because since this is a homemade tool, there's a lot of variability out there. I can't be sure that the plate on Anita's plate meter is gonna weigh the same as the plate on mine. So to publish this is how many pounds per acre per centimeter, probably gonna be pretty far out. So that's why you won't find extension services publishing calibrations on this.
I don't see, like when we walk out there, we're gonna walk past a pasture that was grazed and clipped months ago on?
May 28th.
Yeah, so a month ago. And then we're gonna go to a field that we haven't grazed yet.
Yep.
That's got really tall, headed out grass that's definitely mature, which some of that grass is not gonna be consumed because it is mature. So it'd be interesting to do a measurement in both fields and see what the numbers are because I think it would be fair to assume that it's not going to be accurate comparing those two fields. And on actual consumed grasses and digestible grasses when you look at what's in that field.
That's a great segue between this tool and the next one because both are plate meters and plate meters do struggle once grasses start to head out. So like this Timothy here has headed out. That stem's pretty lignified. It doesn't squish nicely under the plate. It tends to splay out instead. So for this one and the next tool, that is a challenge on mature grass. But in the vegetative state, these tend to work really well. They correlate much more strongly to how much forage you've got out there than the ruler height does. So the last one, so this is a rising plate meter. Mine happens to be a model with a folding handle, so we're gonna get that straightened out. So these are, pardon?
They look like the nerdiest one.
Very possibly. So these are, there's a few companies in the world that manufacture rising plate meters. The difference between a falling plate meter and a rising plate meter is the mode of action. So whereas with that one, I had to gradually lower the plate down onto the grass, this one, I set the handle down and the grass pushes the plate up. So they're both measuring compressed sward height. They're both using that plate to squish the grass down. It's just the mode of action is different. So this one is an analog plate meter. It's got a counter on the bottom that is counting how many notches the plate rises. So every time the plate goes up, that counter counts. When it falls down, the counter doesn't move, it just stays put. This one has no reset, you just turn it over. On the top is a clicker. So every time I set it down, I count the number of measurements. And this is probably the most user-friendly one because I don't have to stop to take a measurement. I make note of my starting number and I can measure a pasture as fast as I can walk. And I don't want to scare the ducks, so I'm gonna come back. So the idea is to set it down straight and pick it up straight, so you're getting a nice clean measurement. Yeah, so then at the end, because this one's analog, at the end I'd have to record my number. I'd figure out the difference. That's the total number of notches that the plate rose, divide by 2 to turn that into centimeters, because these are half centimeter notches. And then divide by the number of measurements I took to get an average for the pasture. That's the most labor intensive way to do it. There are digital models out there. So if you plug the calibration into the digital model, oops, it just spits out how many kilograms of dry matter per hectare you've got. They tend to be manufactured in countries that work on metric more than we do in Canada, so they tend to spit out the answer in metric, but multiply by 0.9, you get it in pounds per acre. It's a very, very similar number. And yeah, like I said, there's digital ones that will do the math for you. Some of them you plug in a USB to take your data off. Some of them come with Bluetooth and GPS. Obviously, the more fancy features you have, the higher the price tag.
So what would that cost?
This one I bought pre-pandemic. The unit shipping from New Zealand and customs was $700.
I feel like I should order two.
The top of the line model that has the Bluetooth and the GPS, I think was $1,500.
They have ones that actually look all behind your UTV and we drive along and it does everything.
So those ones use a little laser to measure the grass. And again, this was a pre-pandemic price. I looked at that. That was 10 grand before import and customs. So we're working on this to see what the return on investment is, how long that would take. I have not started on the tow behind ones because that's
The reality
expensive.
with that one is, I mean, if there was enough interest, hopefully some organization could do a bulk price for shipping.
Yeah, and I think it might be possible to get that price down because right now, or at least last time I checked, there wasn't a North American retailer. I had to call the company, they're happy to ship. But there wasn't someone just selling them right now.